live. So welcome back, everybody. Happy 2021. We've got we're going to ease into the year with a new episode of the Bench Doctor. Tonight, Scott's going to revisit, sort of, because I think we've already seen this gun once, or at least part of
Yeah.
this gun.
Yeah, I'm going to take it completely apart.
Yeah, he's going to revisit a revolver that we've seen earlier. He's going to take it apart. There'll be a running bet in the background on how many hammers and how many times he has to hit it. But I think that's it. Off to you, Scott. If you got questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them.
All right. Well, recently, I don't know, a month or two ago, we did a little video on this gun. It was an auction gun that I got because it wasn't working, and so I got it and kind of got into it a little bit and had to replace a spring and a little kind of guide. But today I thought I would take it all apart and pull all the guts out of it and show you guys. A lot of people over the years have told me they're just scared to death of working on revolvers because they're really complex. And, some of them are, but the big ones, Ruger, Colt, and Smith & Wesson are pretty straightforward. And I would imagine Taurus variants probably are as well because they were based off of the S&W revolvers. So I'm going to take this one apart and just inspect everything, and then I'll put it back together, and I want to show you as I go. Colt kind of layers the pieces on top of each other like a sandwich. Smith & Wesson is different, but I'll show you as I go how this gun works. And this is virtually the same action across all of the Colt revolvers I've worked on. This is the predecessor of the Python. It's the same frame as the Python. This one's only 38 special. 357 didn't exist at the time. Or if it did, they weren't chambering guns for it. This gun's from about 1932, and it's a Colt, what is it? Not Colt Police Positive. So it's the larger frame, unlike the Colt that I had recently, which is a, what's the name of that frame? Anyway, it's much smaller, but if you laid them side by side, they are identical as far as most of the components go. They're not interchangeable, but they look very, very similar. So to take one of these apart, of course, as we all can witness, there are no live rounds on the bench or in the gun. The gun is empty. I'm going to go ahead and start taking it apart and talking through how to do this. And they're really, really not that difficult. If you have any trepidation, get your cell phone out and just take a picture before you take it apart, and maybe as you go, so you remember where pieces went, where you remember what the orientation of them are. It's really easy to start tearing into something and then come back. You think at the time, oh, this is just a screw or a spring. You set it aside, but then when you go to put it back together, you have no idea where it goes or which way it was oriented. So I'm going to go ahead and first take off the grips. And while we were getting ready, I pre-selected the correct tip from my toolbox. And so we then just take off the grips. This is pretty straightforward. If you're scared about taking off grips, you probably shouldn't take a revolver apart. So go ahead and pop these off. And like I say every time, don't pry these things off. You'll break them, and it's frustrating. Go ahead and pull this screw out. Eventually. Yeah, I won this at an auction as a non-functioning gun, and the fix was really minor. So the grips come off. Let me get back where we need to be. And so now what I'm going to do is there are several screws here, but this screw holds in this little chrome button, and that retains the crane in the cylinder. So this screw here locks this button down. So the screw just prevents this button from falling out. They changed this to a different what do you call it? Some people call it the bolt. It's the cylinder lock that notches into here. They changed that setup, but so this is one of the earlier ones. So from here, we're now going to take this screw out, like so. And since this gun is nickel or chrome plated, I got to be careful with the screwdriver work, as it will scratch pretty easily. But the nice thing is, the gun isn't terribly valuable. But if you look at it, you'll see this little screw, and you can tell that it has a second ridge on there. So this that corresponds to this notch in that piece that holds the cylinder in place in the crane. So it just kind of mates together, and then it locks it. This screw, as it goes down, pushes this button down to engage it. Okay. From there, we can now remove our crane and just slide it out. Now, to take one of these apart, you have to remove this ejector right here. And to do that, there's a couple of ways you can do it. I'm sure Brownells will send you a tool if you spend enough money, but you can just extend it out like that. And then I like to just take an old rag. I wouldn't want to take any kind of pliers or, vice grips or anything like that to this, because this is hand fitted to this gun, and the smallest of burrs will cause you headaches. So you push it out with the palm of your hand, let it, keep it above the cylinder, and then you can just grab that star with a rag. These points are fairly sharp, so it would be hard to do by hand. And then you just twist it. You'll feel it break free. If it doesn't break free, soak it in some sort of a solvent like Croil or any kind of anything that you use on stuck fasteners. So that just screws off. And be careful putting this back together, because these threads are pretty fine. I don't know if you can see them, but they're very, very fine. So it would be super easy to cross thread this if you're not careful. Once that's out, you can then just slide your cylinder off. And this is nice because now you can get in there and clean all of the soot and carbon off of it much easier. So that's pretty much it for the cylinder. The crane, there is a spring in here. I'm not going to pull it out, but there's a spring in here that is the stored energy to return this back. When you go to put these back together, there is a specific way that this goes into that cylinder, but we'll cover that when we do the reassembly. Okay, so from there, with the crane out, we just now have these two plate screws up here on the plate. You just take those out, and they are interchangeable. It doesn't matter which goes to which, at least in my experience. I've done a bunch of them and never seen one where I needed to keep them in their specific spot. Take that. So last week we talked about the Smith & Wesson. I have lost track of time. I believe it was.
The week before, I thought.
Oh, okay. The week before. I don't remember. But
last year anyway.
Yeah, it was a year ago. But in that episode, I showed you removing this plate on a Smith & Wesson. And on the Smith & Wesson, it's on the other side of the gun. So just like any of these other ones, you hold this in your hand like that. And here, to make Ed happy, I have a hammer. And I'm just going to tap on the frame, not on the plate. So you just get a couple minor smacks like that, and it should come loose. Get a little bit more. There we go. So now with this piece, this is our plate. I'll try to keep the glare out of your eyes. And then this is the release for it right here. So when I got this gun, this wasn't working. It was jammed up. And so I think that's why they said it was junk. But so inside here, this piece just slides straight out. Be careful when you do this, because there is a little spring and plunger or a spring guide in there. I'm going to grab some needle nose pliers and show you how I lose this part. Here we go. I think I did lose one when I first looked at this gun. I think I dropped it. Probably still floating around my garage somewhere. So, come on out. Just be real careful because they are little tiny pieces. So that piece comes out, that comes out. All right. So that's your inspection plate from here. You see this is serialized to the gun, 580098. That corresponds to the serial number on the crane right here as well. So you know this plate was fit to this gun. These were all made before mass machining and CNC stuff like we have now, and they would produce these fairly quickly, but they all needed to be hand fitted with files and polishing and all kinds of things. So that's why they labeled all these parts. So on a bench, you would know which one went to which gun. So here's our inner workings, the guts of this revolver. And from here, what I'm going to do, I have to take this mainspring out. And this is unlike the Smith & Wesson, which is just one simple spring. This is bent like this. It's a two-sided spring, like on the Webley I did a while back. So from here, I just use a pair of needle nose pliers, and I get in between this arm. I can't remember what the name of this thing is. The action arm, something like that. I just get the tip of my needle nose pliers in here and here, and just squeeze. And there's probably a better way to do this, but this works for me. Okay, you squeeze it, take the tension, or put it under tension, and let me get it unhooked here. And I'll explain how it all goes together when I get this hook out. Why is it being difficult? Done this 10,000 times, but as soon as you turn on the video camera, come on. Why do you not want to come off now? You are not a good boy. Yeah, I had one of these snap on the Webley. We opened up the gun and could see that bottom leg had cracked off of it. There we go. So that's what it looks like. So what's happening, this is redundant if you've been here a while, but I'll say it for anybody that hasn't seen it. This little arm, this leg of the mainspring has a little notch here and a little curl at the end of it that corresponds to this leg on the revolver right here. So it comes up, hooks under there, and then drops into this slot. And the other leg presses down on top of this to provide some spring tension there as well. So we're going to go ahead and set that aside. Now we remove our hand. This is called the hand. This is the piece that advances the cylinder. And it pushes in. You can see these slots. That's where this little lock kind of clicks in. So once that, you can usually just lift this hand right out. Now this is a piece that would be custom fit. Every gun's a little bit different, and if you break a hand, you can order a new one, but they're oversized, so you have to then slowly file it down to whatever dimension works on that cylinder. Okay, and then from there, now we have a little pin right here that holds this in place. So to get that out, these shouldn't be too terribly tough, but to get them out, you just use a punch, just like we always do, and a hammer or some other percussive tool, and you just kind of tap. These shouldn't be in tight. You shouldn't have to wail on one of these to get it out unless there's just a ton of corrosion. And if that's the case, then you'll probably want to soak the gun down before you start tearing into it. There we go. So that pin is out. Set that up there. Okay, so with that out of the way, now we can just come in here and remove this piece. I can make it sound so simple, and yet I can't do it. Should just slide right out of there. There we go. Okay. So this is that bar. And you can see where it's not, this is where that spring leg is laying on top like that. So it's pressing down and pressing up. Okay, with that out of our way, we can now remove our hammer, and that just slides straight up. Get that out of my way. It's kind of like, just like Smith & Wesson. So that's our hammer. And this is our sear surface right here. This is where the sear engages, or the hammer engages the triggers. This little tiny lip right there. And if this is damaged on your gun, I would try to save it, if you could, and save as much metal as you can. Don't just go at it with some heavy duty sandpaper. You're going to ruin the gun, and you're going to end up having to hand fit one of these. So the most I would ever do to one of these is clean it up and maybe deburr it if there was some sort of a burr there. But I would be super careful messing with this. You could polish it if you wanted to. That would help a little bit. So once that's out, now this is the interesting part. You can do this all in one piece. Like you just can lift it all out in one piece, because this kind of snaps together. This is a common problem with these old Colt revolvers right there. So that, yep, see, that's what happens. But it's 3 pieces. And this is your safety arm right here. And it travels up and down in this channel in the gun, right? Let me see, get a better view of that. The glare off you. So right here, this travels up and down, up and down. Okay, and this is just your trigger. And this is where it engages that other notch that I just showed you, the sear. Set those aside. Okay, and then this piece pops out. This is the little retention, piece that mates up with the cylinder. It goes into right here, just like that. That's how that's fitted together. And be careful taking these out. Most of the time it comes out in one piece like that, but don't lose this little upper piece, because this isn't all one piece. They're usually sway or staked together or something, but I don't know how they joined them up. But I've had to have the top part fall off, and if that's the case, hopefully you find the piece, and if you do, blue Loctite it back in place, or even red Loctite it. There's no reason to ever take it back off. It needs to be there, and the gun won't operate without it. So we set that aside. And what else? Okay, the last thing that we could take off right now, and I'm not going to do it because it doesn't need to be done on this gun. Everything looks pretty good, but there is a little screw right here that holds this arm and this cylinder lock. You can see right here what it's doing. So if you ever broke that spring, you'd have to take this screw out and then replace the spring and put it back together. The reason I'm not taking it out is because the slot is extremely shallow, and these are a bugger to get out on just about all of the ones I've seen without boogering up the slot on. And this one is slightly chewed up. Somebody's gone in here without the correct tools. It's hard to get out of there, because what you have to do is push down on your screwdriver with the correct hollow ground tip. You push down and twist. You really want a lot of downward pressure so that the screwdriver doesn't slip out of that slot. So I'm not going to take it out of this one because it is a pain. And I know you guys thrive on my struggles, but I'm not taking the bait this week. So that's pretty much it. That's tearing one apart. I mean, they're pretty simple guns. And I have a Colt Police Positive. It's exact same internals, so the same design, except the pieces are just scaled up a little bit. All right. So are there any questions on this thing up to this point? Are we good to go? Total silence. Okay.
There are no questions so far.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of talk about whether it's a Colt Police Positive Special or an official police.
It's an official police. Here, I'll show you. This is a Colt Police Police Positive right here, and you can see that it's smaller It's a little bit smaller, but it's the exact same guts inside. If you open this gun and took it apart, you could open up this gun and take it apart. Nothing will be different. All the pieces look more or less the same. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together, and I'm going to kind of layer it in there. So if people aren't familiar with how these work, it's a really good way to show what all is going on. So I'm going to go ahead and lubricate this gun a little bit while I'm putting it back together. So I usually just put a little drop on this little screw, just a tiny bit. And then this piece right here, this arm, kind of rocks back and forth like that. Oops. So I'm going to put a little bit of grease on, or a little bit of oil on there. This is a super fine oil, so you don't need a whole lot of it. But anywhere parts are rubbing like that, I like to lubricate. That's working fine. So now we're going to put our trigger, our safety right here, and this little arm back together. And these are made to fit pretty snugly. If you'll see I don't know if this is showing up. Let's see here. You'll see that there's a little, this end is bigger than the bottom. And that is to allow this pin to go in where it's big like that, and then it locks it in place. Common problem is, and I have one ordered for that police positive, is that these these pass-throughs here get hogged out over time. It's a very thin piece of, I don't know if it's probably stamped metal. I don't think it's hardened, maybe, but this gets hollowed out and then it just falls right off the gun, or it falls back off of this arm during reassembly, and then you have to take it all apart and do it again. So I'll show you the little trick I use if you work on one of these and this comes loose, and it keeps coming loose. So once we have that, we then have our safety, which does the same thing on the other end. And this is all easier to put together as 3 pieces than it is to try to do it all in the gun. That's really difficult to pull off. So go ahead and put this in this arm. So this is what the combined piece looks like. Set this out of the way. I don't know if it's showing up on that background. No, it's a very poor choice of backgrounds. Let's see here. Let's see if I can lay it in my hand. So that's what it looks like, all attached. So this then drops back into the gun with our safety going in this channel. This hole right here goes right over this post. And then the trigger, this trigger hole here goes onto this post. So, and I don't think this gun was used very much because a lot of these parts are in pristine condition. So that drops into that slot. Trigger goes over that. So you can see now as I pull the trigger, you can see it activating this safety. When the trigger is back, it drops this bar down and kind of blocks this pin. And then when it resets, it pushes that bar back up. So once that's in place, we can then take our hammer right here, and I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of lubrication on this pin because this is spring loaded right here. So I want it to move freely and also to hopefully push any moisture out of there. I don't want any kind of rust or anything in my gun. And I might put a little drop on this spring right there. That's why I like these oil bottles with these little fine tips, because you can get into those places. So once we drop this back in, this is now going to drop over the same post. It shares the same post with this arm. So it just drops right over the top like so. Let's see if I can get it in the right orientation now so it engages properly. Out a little bit. I'm going to have to build a completely separate piece of bench here to mount the cameras on so I don't shake them. Oh, come on out of there. So, okay. Okay. All right. So that what's happening now is I don't know if this is really going to show up, but I'll do my best to explain what's happening. So right here is our trigger. Trigger is interfacing with the hammer, and there's a little ledge right there that this is pushing up. When you pull the trigger, watch this piece right here moves out of your way like that, allowing the hammer to fall forward. And then on reset, it comes back and you hear it click into place like that. Okay. And then if you were shooting this or in a single action mode, you would stage the trigger, hear it click right there. And then when you pull the trigger, it disengages from the sear, the hammer goes forward. Reset does it all over again. All right. Does that make sense to anybody? I'm trying to show how it works as I go because it's interesting, and it's amazing to me that 100 years ago they were able to produce these things and hand fit all of these pieces, and it's just ingenious. Really Rube Goldberg looking things. So once again, that just locks in there. Pull the trigger, it drops. All right, now we're going to put this action bar back in right here. And what I'd like to do is put a little thin coat of grease on it, just as moisture protection, and also because of friction, because this other mainspring kind of rides up and down on this surface. So we'll give it as much chance of survival as we can. And this, when we have this much surface area rubbing together, that's when I like to use grease. Grease is the word. Okay, rag and wipe the grease off my fingers. So this goes in this way, it goes into the gun, the point going forward. And so we drop it in here. Let's see if I can show you where this is going. It goes back just in the same spot. Get it lined up in there. I had one of these recently that I was fixing for a friend that somebody had treated harshly, and get this going in here. It's just a funny angle to be working from with that camera there. Okay, and it goes right in there. That's the way it looks in the gun. Okay, I get my little pin. Where's my punch? So what I'm gonna do is use the punch to align these holes, so I don't see any. So I see nothing but daylight. Okay, I'm gonna take my little pin, and this should almost just push back in. A little bit snug. Just give it a little tappy tap, like that. Okay, now that piece is back in the gun. Now we do our hand. Okay, and this hand, this leg or this post on this hand interfaces with the trigger right here. There's a little hole right there, and it just drops in there. And then this has to ride in this little notch in the gun right there. So what I do is I like to kind of pull this spring out of my way, get the trigger down like so.
While there is silence, here is a question.
Yeah.
How come you aren't using a light coat of oil over the entire interior, given that the gun would not be normally opened again, except for a repair that could be years later, unless you already did that?
No, dust and carbon and stuff get in there and turn oil to sludge, to black sludge. So I'm just oiling the pieces that, in my mind, need oil. Sometimes you'll take a gun apart that somebody has done that and put, for years has put oil on it, and it just gets gross, and it coagulates into looks like charcoal. It's nasty stuff. It doesn't hurt anything, but eventually it will build up to the point where the gun won't run. So that's why I just oil the little pieces that I think need it. Let's see here. Where'd I put my oil bottle? Well, it's all right. We got 3 of them. Have another one. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil on this post where this trigger rotates. Let it work down in there a little bit. And then one trick you can use to get oil into really fine places that you can't get, like even one of these little needle tips in it, is to take a can of compressed air or an air compressor, and you can just blow the oil in where you need it, just a little bit. It just blows the oil around and gets it down into all the little cracks and crevices. If I hadn't completely taken this gun apart, if I wanted to just do some routine maintenance on it, I might pop that plate off, clean up the inside as well as I can without disassembling it, and then put some oil on there and blow it into all of the spaces that I want it to go with the compressed air. So once that's in place, we now take our plate, and let me show you how tiny this little piece is. This little tiny guide right here. It acts like a guide rod on your pistols, on like a 1911 or a Glock. They have that guide rod with the recoil spring over it. And this is doing the same thing. And with my total lack of manual dexterity and skill, I use needle nose pliers for this to drop that little guide back in. So this goes down, and in the hole right here, there's a little hole. I don't know if I can show it right there. And that's where the spring and the little guide go into. And to get this one in there, I surrender. I'm old, arthritic, grumpy. I use needle nose pliers to drop that spring in right there. Be careful not to damage the spring. But see, I hate this thing. Drop that back in there. Keeps following it. I think this must be magnetized slightly. Okay. Come on. There we go. So once that's in place, we can take our little tiny guide rod right here and drop it just right down the top of that spring, like that. Okay. Hold it upright like this while you're working on it, because you'll dump those parts out and then you'll be really angry with yourself. So now this piece, you can see, just has a slight channel to it that corresponds to these channels in the plate. So I just slide it right in like so. And you can test it a little bit. Put a little drop of oil in there. And then actually, I think I'm going to take this off and take the opportunity to put a little bit of grease on these parts, on these surfaces that rub. So go ahead, just put a little bit of grease on those. I don't like metal rubbing on metal, but that's the way they're made. Okay. So once again, we're just going to drop that down that channel. Spring loaded. So now I keep my finger over this as I set it in place. And if you have one of those revolvers that I was talking about before, that piece gets wallered out. While you're assembling the gun, what I do is put a little bit of pressure with my finger, kind of right above where the trigger interacts with it, and that's to keep the parts from kind of jumping off. Because this is only like I don't remember how thick the metal is, but it's very thin, so it's easy for the pin coming off the trigger to pop out of there. And then when it does, the gun doesn't function properly, and you have to take it all apart. So here we go. So now when I put this back on, you'll notice it looks like a detent hole or something. There's a hole right here, and that Oh, I forgot to put that piece back in. Yeah, you knew I would do it. Hold on just 1 second. I knew I would screw this up. Okay. Sorry about that,
It
folks.
only counts as a screw up if by the end of the video it's not back together.
This is the piece I forgot. Well, no, it'll be back together. If we're sitting here at 4 a.m, no, it shouldn't take long. I just completely, I was telling Lonnie yesterday online, I don't multitask well. Pop that pin back out. Get this out of my way. Yeah, set that aside. But welcome to my life. I am always doing this, something like this. So this, I don't know if I could be able to do it with, get that thing completely out of my way. Just not enough space for it. I'll just have to take the whole thing apart. I don't want to fight with it. Get that off. Okay, that goes in there. I forgot that piece. So that goes in there like that. Now I can put it all back together. That was just a trial run, test fitting. Okay. Let's see. Oh, get that back. Okay, there we go. All back together. Put this back in. Our mainspring part 2. And compress it. Get it up on that legs right there. Okay. Now it's back in place. There we go. Oh. Hold on. I just screwed it up again. I forgot to put the action bar back in. Hey, guys, send me your guns. Let me work on them for you. You might get more parts back than you dropped it off with. Just back in there. Like so. Just give it a little tappy tap. Now I can put my mainspring back in. Yeah. Now I do software engineering at work, and I like to just focus on one thing at a time, but my brain isn't that big. Oh, just popped it out of my hand. Okay, so once again, I'm going to hook that arm coming off of the hammer. I'm sorry if I'm blocking your view. This is the only way I can get in there. Okay. There we go. So now that's back in place. Okay. Okay.
The inside of this gun looks really pristine. Did you do a super thorough cleaning on it when you first got it?
I did. Yeah, it hadn't been abused. It just had been neglected. As far as my understanding was, that it belonged to a New Orleans cop, and when he passed away, his family just put all his guns up for sale. And this is probably no, I won't go down that road. So anyway, it comes from it was found in a pillowcase in a New Orleans.
So John, sorry, I'm reading somebody's comment. Scott, the inside of the gun looked pretty clean. The question is you must have cleaned this thoroughly in order to make it work, which I believe you said you did. Yes,
I did. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this plate back on, and what we're going to have to do is we're going to push this release down so that this hole right here is visible, because that sits right on top of this piece we just put back in right there. So you got to get those aligned for this to fall into place. And this is where one of these pieces that you just do not force. If it doesn't go, take it out and figure out what the problem is, because get this back where it needs to be. Okay, so once again, I'm going to place this right over that post. You'll feel it when it's in the right place, because it just goes like that. Okay, now I'm going to tap the plate down. Something's not. Oh, I wonder if we just lost our connection to that arm again. Yeah, it's going to piss me off. Let's see here. Oh, spring's out of place. Again. All right, get on there. Someone's being a bugger today.
Other than potentially scratching the surface with a screwdriver, are there other concerns with disassembling and reassembling nickel or chrome-plated firearms?
Not to me. I tend to treat the screws on that are user facing carefully, because I don't want to scratch them, and you don't want to pry stuff, because that's always a bad idea with 100-year-old gun parts. So let's get this back. You suck. So get it all right aligned. Pull this back and drop it in. But it's got to fit right over that that post. A little tap. Okay. Full action. So that's all in working order. I'm going to take my 2 plate screws, put these back in. Yeah, with these, to your question, you can see how shiny the frame is and how shiny the screw is. And if you were using the wrong screwdriver, and what you can do is just gouge the finish right off the gun. If the screwdriver is wider than the slot on the screw, it will overlap. And if you're putting any downward pressure on it, will scratch the heck out of it. So I try to go very slowly on these and be very careful. I just did buy all the stuff to do plating, though. So I'm going to glamp out a gun at some point. I don't know which one, but I was thinking of maybe taking the slide off the high point and doing a copper finish on it. It would be spectacular.
I have a trapdoor Springfield with a can. You want to nickel plate it?
Yeah, I'll nickel plate the can.
No, nickel plate the trapdoor Springfield. Nothing like a 150-year-old gun.
Oh yeah. Well, I really want to do it with something completely outrageous. If I were, like my H&K, my HK-43, plate that thing, and then just wait for the death threats. Okay, so that's back in. Now we can take our crane and we can reassemble this, and it just slides right on. But I don't know if this detail is going to show up, but this is kind of important. The end of this is specially made to correspond. You can see the 2 little indents here and here, and then a bigger one on this side. And that's to make this fit together perfectly. So when you're putting this together, you have to just look down and make sure that these little bumps correspond to the same place on the cylinder. And it can be a bear sometimes getting them lined up. I just drop it in there. I like to extend the rod out, and I just kind of keep looking until it aligns properly. Let's see, I usually reference off of the biggest slot, which is to my left. So it goes this way. And it would make a lot more sense if you could look at it and see what I'm seeing. But if you look here down, you'll see these channels. These 2 channels right here correspond to these two notches. So that's how you know you got it right. And then you take your star, as my son calls it, and thread it back on there. Once again, go carefully because these are really finely threaded. And then if you can see it, there are a little half moon or a little semicircle piece taken out here and here, and that matches the little bumps here and here. So this is custom fit. And so you need to make sure when you rotate this around that you get those aligned properly. That, no, see, not quite. It's standing up just a little bit. So I got to figure out which way to go. Like that. No, I got to go one more turn. There we go. Because you want it to sit flush so there's no edge. You shouldn't be able to feel that edge with your fingernail. It looks like they put an index mark right there. Maybe not. I don't know, but it could just be a flaw. But so once you've got that in there, you then just slide the crane back in. And I'm going to grease this because this does rub. Slides in like that. Might not all the way in somewhere. There. Why is it not closing there? Why do we have a fail to close? Figure out what's going on here. That's weird. Take a look. Properly. Where is it? Why does it not want to go in the battery now? That's weird. Everything else looks fine. Anything wrong on the crane? It's odd. Where is it bumping? That's what I don't understand. What is it bumping into in there? Yeah, what's happening is this isn't dropping all the way back in to its channel like it's supposed to. And I'm trying to see where it's binding so then I can take it apart and fix it. This gun's never acted up on me before. But of course it will do it today. What is the problem here? My hand in the way? It shouldn't be. Huh. Well, let's pop the plate off and see everything looks right. That's weird. Never had this gun give me any headaches till now because I'm.
It wouldn't be a Scott bench doctor moment without something.
Oh no! Without a hammer and a befuddled look.
Plus, we need to give Paul something for his bench doctor oopsies segment.
Yeah, I sent him a whole bunch of videos recently. I don't know if he's downloaded them yet about that old Colt Police Positive that I had kind of brought back to life, and I did a little video on every stage of it, and so that should be available soon for your viewing pleasure. So let's go ahead and try it again. Well, let's see what happens if we put this on there. See, it's still hanging up, but why and where? is it? I can't fathom where it's hanging up. Look at it this way.
Paul's working on those, by the way, as you speak, and
okay.
wants to thank you for all the new gray hair.
Oh yeah, did he not like all the editing I left him? It's a good thing he didn't see the first attempt. That was the problem. I didn't have that wheel screwed down far enough. All right, let's put the plate back on one more time. That where it needs to go. Put this one out of my way. Yeah, that gun that was destined for a police trade-in at some point, as crusty as it was. Kind of neat though to get it back to running. I've got all new springs for it coming. I was hoping they'd be here because then I just put them in and kill two birds with one stone. But not so lucky because screw the U.S. Post Office. No, I hate you. I hate you.
What you can't hear, Scott, is all the laughter in the background.
Oh, I know. I would be laughing too. But if you remember the last time I touched this gun on tape, this little piece went flying. And that was interesting that this one little part boogered up the whole gun. A little cheap. I can't remember what, I think $6 for both pieces to get a gun back into operating order. That and some time. Make sure that that's in the right place. There it needs to be. Yep. Okay. Well, it wouldn't be. I don't think I've ever gotten a gun apart and then put it all back together without some sort of disassembly. Okay. We are clear for takeoff. There we go. That's that. Now let's put our screws back in. Yeah, that old Colt Police Positive was kind of fun. I hope the video comes out and makes some sense. If not, I'm certain to be doing another one at some point, and we'll just re-record all the steps. But it was just an old beater Colt Police Positive that some knucklehead had taken a wire wheel to, and just destroyed the what was left of the finish on the gun. But it was in great operating order. So I took it all apart and stripped it, degreased it, sanded it down, and then rust blued it a couple of times to get this is it right here. So it was pretty bad, but now at least it's serviceable. It wasn't a full restoration because it's just not an old Colt official police or police positive just aren't worth that much money. Nobody collects them because I think I know they made millions of them. So nothing unique or special about it unless it was engraved or you had the provenance that it was owned by somebody that matters. I'm going to screw this back on. So what do we got going next week? Is it me or is it a panel or?
I actually don't know if the panel's next week or the week after. I'll have to check with Danny. We'll put it up on the website and folks will get a chance to register for it. But if you've got a plan, let us know what it is. And if it's not next week, the week after.
I'll figure something out. So that when I put this back in, this is the piece. You can see how it's got this crescent shape in it. That's what's locking the crane in place. So when I put these in, I just set them in my hand and I kind of made up the two parts. And then I put them in together as one piece. I don't know of any other way to do it. So I just kind of hold them like that, put them straight down into the gun. I'm just doing this by hand because I cannot see with the light. And I don't want to put my giant head in the picture here. Like that. And then as I screw it down, it came out. I hate guns. Why do I do this to myself? Maybe this is probably why they changed that system. It's not hard. It's just tedious and frustrating. Some of these little pieces to get them all in place. And then when you have like sausage fingers like I do and no natural physical abilities, it makes it even more difficult. Oops. Okay. The only other thing we could have really disassembled on the gun was take that little bottom latch cylinder lock spring out, or taking the barrel off of the gun, which I don't want to do. I don't have any reason to do it. All right, so get a couple of snap caps. So I hope everybody had a good New Year's holiday. It sounds like all the regulars lived through it. I just stayed up until 12:01 to verify that the year was actually over, and then I went to bed. But I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to have December 45th or something. So dry fire it.
Have you real fired it?
This one, yeah. Right after I fixed it, I took it out and fired it a couple of times. But since then, I haven't done anything with it.
So one last question, Scott, that I see here. Are there parts that need maintenance replacements for which we need to watch during regular use?
Trying to think. Not really. These old revolvers are pretty bomb-proof. I mean, of course, it would never hurt you to have consumables on hand, like an extra mainspring or something. But heck, those break so rarely. Honestly, I can't think of anything that I keep that's redundant for revolvers. Honestly, so I think you'd be fine. Maybe you get a spring kit somewhere and throw it in a box in case something breaks. But I would be fully confident to take one of these apart on the tailgate of my truck and put it back together. My biggest fear would be dropping something and not being able to find it. But they're pretty simple. I mean, they really are once you get into them and mess around with them a little bit. They're not at all complicated. I think the lock work on the Colts I like it better than I do on the Smith, but it's arguable as which one is better. It's just, I think I like these to work on. So anyway, I think it was a $260 gun with an additional $6 in parts. And here we are. That was disassembly and reassembly on an old Colt. I'm going to leave this upside down just because I know one of our friends doesn't like it.
Yeah, that's gonna get all sorts of cruft from Eric. He really doesn't like it to be upside down. We can go ahead and name him.
Okay, well that's pretty much it. They're pretty straightforward, and Colt kind of layers the pieces on top of each other to make up the lock work, where Smith & Wesson doesn't really do that. A little bit, but not much. So it's really interesting to see the two different, the same problem solved with two different solutions, both working very well. But anyway, that's that.
Well, thank you so much. Are there any more questions in the room?
Yes. With regards to you saying Colt versus Smith, if you were going to look at the Ruger double actions, would it be comparable to either of those, or is it yet a third way?
It's a completely different animal. I mean, it's a revolver, but the lock work on it is completely different.
Well, it sounds like we need to get you a Ruger.
Well, yeah, I'll pull a Ruger out. I have both a single action and double action single sixes, and then I have a GP 100.
I think you should do the GP 100. Let's do you do the Model 10. You've done the
Yeah. Well,
the
maybe
police
next
positive here.
we can take apart a GP 100. They're such a different animal because the whole, trigger assembly just drops out, of the gun. You just pull it. It's a separate piece from. It's interesting how they did it, but yeah, well, maybe next week we could talk about the old Ruger GP 100. I don't know if the lockwork in the SP 101 is the same. I would imagine it's the same, just scaled down a little bit. I don't know why you would change it.
Ruger seems to reuse stuff, so I would imagine that's true. But hey, we should find out. We do also have some people begging to do a single six, so perhaps a single action.
Yeah, I could get I have my Colt single action Army, and then I have the single action single sixes, both the old one and the new one. One has a transfer bar, the other one doesn't. So yeah, I can do the Colt. It needs to get cleaned anyway.
Well, I think on that note, unless there are other questions that we really need to address, we go ahead and stop the stream. Thanks again, and thanks everybody for coming. And if you don't know where the Discord server is by now, you really should. This is usually somebody's cue to put a link in the chat. But paying members come to Discord server. We usually have a pub chat right afterwards, and we will see you next week, and we'll figure out what the hell we're doing.